Welcome to the Lighthouse Financial Advisors Money Over 50 podcast with Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Lighthouse Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Today, here again with Michael Hogue, and he's got another topic that sounds like an infomercial. Today we've got turning $100 per week into $100,000.
What if I were to tell you?
I knew you were going to launch into that.
Seriously, this should be a quick hitter, a practical one.
Yep.
I'm going to start with the premise
Yep.
that every single listener has a spare $100 per week somewhere, including the podcast hosts.
I'd say there's more than a spare $100 per week that gets, if I calculate, I actually did these numbers which are a bit scary. I've got $50 a week going into one punters club, $30 a week going into another one. So there's 80 before you start.
Well, there you go, yeah. So
and everyone's probably got things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably not a good example because I really enjoy that. So I don't really want to keep that up. But there are other things for sure that we could both do.
There are other things and there's a collection of things.
Yeah.
So if you look at your entire budget, where say it's a list that's longer than your arm of where you spend your money. So in amongst that, let's just start with the premise that we could find this money somewhere.
Yeah.
So every single person that's listening could do this from tomorrow, arguably.
And so this is why this should actually be a quick podcast, is that we were talking about this before we started recording, that this is a real life case study that flows through into a lot of different areas. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't have a spare $100 per week, there's a heap of other podcasts we've already done talking about how to budget, when you should change your budget, like when you should be looking at this, how often, different ways to do this, different ways to look at what you're spending, different ways to adjust that, all that kind of thing. So if you're if you're stumbling straight away going, I don't think I've got a spare $100 per week, I urge you to go back throughout history. There are many, many different podcasts talking about how to save that money in a way that isn't going to mean that you've got to, in my case, give up all of the fun punters club trips that you want to go on.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. So episode 3. I mean, I always bring this one up. It's one of the greats, of course. Drive a $15,000 car to draw an extra $700 and something thousand dollars.
All of the greats are ones that were your idea, mate.
But I guess that's a good example in that you might look at your budget right now and say, okay, well, I don't have a spare $100 per week, but your budget right now might include, I don't know, leasing an expensive car or something like that. So it's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Let's just start with that premise that there's at least $100. What I wanted to do is just to make it a manageable amount. It's a nice round number, $100 per week. We've looked at it for 11 years. Yeah. It didn't quite match up over 10 years. But and here's how it works. So $100 per week in the hand, really, for someone that's on a 34.5% marginal rate of tax, it's actually $153 that they can put into their superannuation fund. Because the money goes in before tax.
So
superannuation.
Again, we've recorded a heap of different podcasts about the mechanics of salary or before tax contributions into super, and whether you do this as a personal contribution, salary sacrifice. In this case, if you were, every week you take the top $153 of your income, and instead of paying income tax at 34.5%, so in this case you've said someone who earns between sort of $37,000 and $90,000, which is a fairly average wage. So they take the top $153 per week, they salary sacrifice that into their superannuation fund. What it costs them out of pocket is $100.
That's right, yeah. So whichever way you dice it up, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Ultimately, if you salary sacrifice and claim the tax deduction at the payroll level every week, or if you claim it at the end of the year, how it works though is effectively from that $153 for a 34.5% marginal rate of tax, employee or self-employed, doesn't really matter. What happens is that they're paying $53 of tax on that money, at the moment, because they're not putting any money in.
Yep.
Let's assume this money is theoretical. They're paying $53 in tax. They're only spending $100 after tax. So what we're saying is that if they actually push that into their superannuation fund, hey, they wouldn't need to pay the $53 of income tax. They could put $153 into their superannuation fund.
Yep.
And have that grow for them. Now, they do pay 15% tax on the way in.
Yep.
15% is a lot less than 34.5%.
So you don't have to be a mathematical genius to work that out. If you're going to pay tax, you'd rather pay it at 15% than 34.5%.
Yeah, that's right. So if someone does that for 11 years, then they get a 6.8% after-tax return and after-cost return on their superannuation earnings or return, rate of return, or whatever way you want to think about that. If they get a 6.8% net rate of return after taxes and everything else, that $153 a week that they're able to put into their super fund, which is really only $100 in the hand that they were collecting, grows to $105,000 over 11 years.
Yeah.
So where that's useful is that 11 years really isn't that long.
No.
And if you're looking, if you're listening, of course, most of our listeners are in their 50s.
Over 50, yeah. If you're not over 50, you're a real rule breaker and a rebel, and you're listening to money over 50 even though you're not 50. So
yeah, that's right. So, 10 or 11 years it's a short enough period of time. We always talk about 10 years as it's a short enough period of time for people to stick to the strategy.
Yeah.
And it's just long enough for compounding to start to work. So here's how this works: is compounding.
Yeah.
So you put in $100 per week times 11 years. You've put in a total of 50. Well, it's cost you out of your own pocket $57,200 of money that you've given up that would have come to you as after-tax income. I'm going to say that $57,200, that $100 per week. Over 11 years that you were going to get in the hand would have just gone on pretty much junk.
Yep.
And you'd be sitting back at retirement going, not necessarily where did that money go, it's where did all of that money go.
Yeah.
I
actually think that's to me why I love this rule of thumb, and I talk about it all the time with people, because it's not about saying don't spend money. It's about saying you're just deferring that 11 years. So you can either spend, and part two, we'll do a separate podcast about what does that extra $100,000 mean in terms of income that you can draw. But there's a heap of different amounts.
Different ways you can do that.
But
I've actually looked at that.
Have you?
Let's say you treat this pot of money, this extra $105,000,
as
completely separate to your other superannuation.
Yeah.
And we're a big believer in, well, you're not necessarily. I'm a believer in segregating different amounts of money.
Yeah.
So you get to retirement, you've managed to start today.
Yeah.
You've put $100 a week in from after-tax dollars.
Yep.
Which is really $153
before tax,
per week that's going in from before-tax dollars. You've managed to accumulate an extra $105,000 at retirement. You fast forward 11 years. You're sitting here at your retirement with $105,000 extra. What I'm going to say is that this person decides to draw an extra $10,000 every year to go on a holiday. Let's assume they can draw an extra $10,000 a year from that $105,000 for 24 years.
Yep.
And in the 25th year, they can draw $2,067
there you go.
Before that money fully runs out. So what they've done, what they've been able to do, they've accumulated an extra $105,000. They've actually been able to draw a total amount of $242,000 of additional income, $10,000 extra every year for 24 years, plus $2,067 in the 25th year. Now, the reason for that is that money isn't static. It makes a rate of return for you.
Yeah.
So
you're going to use the metaphor of the money getting up and going to work for you.
I won't say your money gets up and gets dressed and goes to work. So with that extra $105,000, imagine that earning an 8% rate of return now. So we said 6.8% before. What we were talking about there was that it was an 8% rate of return before tax. So your rate of return is taxed at 15% inside your superannuation fund. An 8% rate of return after paying the superannuation earnings tax or rate of return tax cuts down to 6.8%. Hey, once you've retired though, the rules are that you can turn your super fund into a 0% taxed superannuation income stream. So what that really means is that you get to keep all of that 8% rate of return now. So you don't lose. It doesn't reduce back to 6.8% after tax. You get to keep the whole 8%. So $105,000. It's actually $105,589 to be exact. 8% rate of return on that. $8,447 is what your money makes in the first year of your retirement.
Yep.
You draw $10,000 out to go on a holiday. So your balance doesn't drop by $10,000. It only drops from $105,589 to $104,037. You've taken, let's call it interest. You've taken the interest on that money, $8,447. That's what it's earned for you. You've drawn $10,000. You've only gone backwards by a little bit. And I should just point out there as well, and you'll in the interest of deferring back to previous podcasts, just in the interest of us not being sued, that 8% rate of return isn't guaranteed. So
there are many decisions that go into it.
There's a lot of decisions that go into this. That's what we believe a high growth fund can achieve over time. Hey, there will be years where that goes backwards by 57%.
But
before that average is
But in the interest of this case study, it's a very simple one and what I'm thinking as I look at this is, if you break that, if we're talking about dollars per week, you basically $100 per week for 11 years, and you can then turn around and flick the switch and draw $200 per week, which is effectively $10,000 a year. So you basically take back out double what you put in for over double the amount of time. So you basically, you give up $100 a week for 11 years, you draw out $200 a week for more than 22 years. So, and this is kind of what all ties back to what you're talking about. There's two parts of this, which is the tax savings on the way in. So to give up $100 per week net means you actually get to put far more than that into your superannuation fund. And then, hey, once it's inside there, you're getting a rate of return that's concessionally taxed and that it can be growing for you over the next 10 years, 11 years while you're still working, and then 25 years while you're retired. So the effects of that, that's a really good, simple rule of thumb that we talk about a lot, is that if you can turn whatever you can free up every week, it's your decision ultimately with how much you think you can afford to save for your retirement, or how much you want to save for your retirement. But every $100 per week that you give up for that last 10, 11 years, you can pretty much draw double that amount out throughout your retirement. So it makes it a lot, like you said, 10, 11 years is a great time frame because you can see here the impact that makes, but it's also short enough to go, I can see that it's only 11 years before I get to flick the switch and start to actually draw that out. And that's, to me, the motivating factor is that if you say to someone, hey, you should, if you talk about this in conceptual terms, you should salary sacrifice to super to grow your retirement savings. It's the least exciting, least interesting thing in the world.
Well, that's why I always look at this and I say, let's imagine you took that $10,000 out every year and went on a holiday with that money. So it just helps frame it because you are giving something up now. But my theory again is that we're all spending $100 a week somewhere. In fact, we're spending multiple amounts of $100 per week, where we could probably rein that in and not notice the difference to our lifestyle. So if we just talk about the original $100 per week, and you say, okay, well, I'm going to do that, you would almost notice no difference to your lifestyle. For the next 11 years, you would notice a big difference to your lifestyle for the next 24 years because you get to draw an extra $10,000 out. And in the interest of not harming any animals, it doesn't matter how you skin that cat, that theoretical. It doesn't matter how you skin that theoretical cat. You could say, okay, well, why would I want to draw out $10,000 a year for 24 years? I won't be travelling in 24 years after I've retired. I'll just up that to $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
So you can draw $15,000 a year for for a substantial period of time. I don't have the exact figures on that.
No, and that, like I say, that's probably part two. But the big thing, the thing I like about making this concrete is that it's very easy in this with 10 years to go in your working life. It's very easy for people to kind of go, and you hear this all the time, where people go, I'd rather enjoy myself now rather than save more and have more money when I'm 90. And what you're proposing here with this money on the edge is like we say, if you looked at this with someone and they said, you know what, I know that $100 per week turns into $10,000 a year all through my retirement, or it turns into $20,000 a year for the first 10 years of my retirement or whatever, but I still just think that I want to spend that money now, then that's fine. That's a choice that you go into making with your eyes open.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people don't take into account is the effects of this over 10 and 20 years, is that it's no one saying that you can't have any fun for the next 10 years.
No.
And then have, live this luxurious retirement, but then you're actually old and can't travel and don't want to do these things. All you're saying is just by deferring some of those things for 10 years, and you're not even saying deferring those things, you're basically just saying, take that $100 per week that you're probably not even missing at the moment. Yeah. Just cut back on a few of those things that you're not getting any enjoyment out of. And the incentive to do that is that you do get to enjoy yourself far more in those years of retirement. So I think that's the big thing for me, is that we look at this in really black and white terms, where we go, I'm either saving everything for retirement or I'm just going to enjoy myself and not think about it. And what we're big proponents of is that balance of getting the balance right between enjoy yourself now, but get set up so that you can live that retirement that you want.
Yeah, look, excellent point to make, because at either end of the spectrum in almost anything you do in your life, it's not where you want to be. You don't want to be at either end of the spectrum. So this is still in the middle of the spectrum. You're still enjoying your life, and for me, it's something people could almost implement tomorrow. Without noticing the difference. And it's not saying that so for some people that we meet with 10 years to go, we have to do multiples of this to get them to where they need to be. Let's assume though, and again, that's an all or nothing approach. So they're doing nothing now. We say you need to do 5 lots of this to get to where you really need to be. So some people would see that as an all or nothing. Okay, well, I don't want to do all of that, so I'll do nothing. So there's a middle ground, and the middle ground is something like this, where this is better than doing nothing by a long shot.
And that's I guess why it's a if you think of it again, you're talking about the siloing of money, where the average person who comes in to see it for the first time with $500,000, they're on track for about $1 million in 10 years' time. And for most people, they probably need about 1.5. And this is all very, very generic. But the beauty of this is that you can you can then frame that discussion of, rather than saying, well, you need $500,000, and to do that, you need to give up $500 per week. It's then a discussion of, well, how many bites of this are you willing to take? Do you want to do the full $500 per week to get to that 1.5 mil to live this retirement that you want to, or are you proposing? And this is where it becomes a discussion about trade-offs. Do you say, well, I don't really want to do that. I can see myself doing $200 or $300 per week, but I don't want to do the full 500. We'll end up in this position in 10 years' time, 11 years' time. We know what that means for retirement, and we're okay with that. That's the discussion that we like to have generally in that sort of second meeting with people, is about how hard are you wanting to go here, and what are these trade-offs? How many lots of this $100 per week are you wanting to do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So so that's really all I had to say today. It's should be a nice quick hitter. Yeah, even though we've been going for 20 minutes. We get started and then we start talking and we get talking. So
no, that's I think a good simple rule of thumb for people is, and that's what I'd say the takeaway from today is, not to say everyone should do $100, but the takeaway is that you don't have to it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Every $100 gets you an extra 100,000. Again,
and I know for a fact that every single person listening, in fact, every single person almost everywhere has.
I've been to shantytowns in Africa where they probably don't.
They probably don't there, but
anyone in Australia.
Anyone that's listening would generally have $100 per week spare somewhere.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Lighthouse Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.